This is Pod Populi, podcast for the people.
Welcome back to Level Up. I appreciate you taking the time to come back today to listen in to episode 2, where it's a different kind of podcast. This is a podcast where the goal is that you have the ability to learn something that you don't know, or learn something more that you do know, and you leave every time with value and something new that you can add to your life. This week, we're going to be talking about identity. We're going to take a look in the mirror. And so one of the things that I want to do is remind you that if you look in a mirror, it doesn't lie. I think all of us walk by mirrors. We're always looking in the mirror. We take a look at our fit to make sure it looks good. How's my hair look? How's everything look? Am I looking good before I go out or when somebody sees me, right? Mirrors don't lie. And so today what I want to do is ask you to take a look in the mirror and talk about identity, right? Understand that, you have an identity, but do you really understand what it is? Do you really understand who you are? One of the things that I'll tell you is that we're talking about physical identity first, right? But remember, physical identity is only who you are on the outside. That's one piece of your identity, right? That people see, what you see in the mirror that doesn't lie to you. So let me ask you this question. If you stripped everything away from your life, you took your job, your clothes, your Instagram accounts, your games, let me ask you, who would you be? All right, take a minute and think about that. If you took everything away, who would you still be? That begins to talk about your identity. Here's a fact. Gen Z, if I look at the ages between 17 to 32, let's just say that you're in your 20s, okay? You are at a quarter of a lifetime at 20 years old. You're at a quarter of your life already has passed you by. A quarter, right? Well, what does that mean? There's a lot going on in this window of time. From that period of 17 to 32, you will have more stress, more confusion, more anxiety than potentially any other time in your life. Why? Because you're going to be engaging in all kinds of circumstances around life. If you're 20 years old, you are actually in a place of having to self-discover, right? It's confusing because so many things are changing. Let me tell you some of the things that are going to change. And some of you experience this because in the midst of this window of time, again, it'll be some of the biggest changes and adaptations you'll ever have to make in your life. So listen to some of these. Number one, you learn to drive, right? Some of you learn to drive. Some of you are better than others. Some of you learn to crash, okay? But you learn to drive. You graduate. You graduate from school in this window of time. You graduate from college. You have multiple relationships. You remember the first one that you had? Did that go well or did that crash and burn? Then you had another one. Did you learn from each one? But through your 20s, you're going to have multiple relationships. You're going to learn what that means. You're going to feel stress about your future, right? Many of you are probably right now thinking about your future. You think about it every day. Where am I going? What am I going to do? What do I need? What's my first job? Some of you haven't had a real first job. You kind of been floating around and maybe you're working part-time. Maybe you're getting into a full-time position. What am I going to do with my life? Who am I? Where am I going to work? I got to get used to working. Many of you who are currently working understand the dynamics of a culture at work. When you went to work the first time, it was different. You had to learn how to work in a business. You had to learn to work with colleagues. You had to learn to understand how to take direction, right? All of this is part of who you are and identity. You've got to decide about college. You've got to decide about a degree. You've got to decide about where I'm going to go, right? Oh, by the way, what college am I going to? How am I going to pay for it? How am I going to make the money, or how am I going to get the money to pay for my school? What about substances? What about partying, right? You're now going to deal with those decisions and those choices in this window of time. They're going to be very real. And you're going to have to learn how to deal with this stuff without blowing your life up. Where do I live? How about that one? Am I going to live with my parents? Am I going to go get my own place? Am I going to partner up with some people and share rent, right? You're going to assume your own bills during this period of time. You're going to come off the parent plan, right? I know many times parents will still help out. I do the same right now with cell phones, with some car payments for my sons. But you're going to begin to have to own your own bills. And many of you are dealing with this right now. And some of you have transitioned into it and are really dealing with it, right? Here's what's interesting. Think back to when you were in high school, how everything in your world revolved around high school. Who was cool? Who was the jock? Who was the best looking, right? Who was jacked? Who could do great things from an athletic perspective, right? And then realize that once you left high school, that little bubble that you were in went and popped, right? Everything changed when you walked out of high school. All of those things that mattered in your life up to that point no longer mattered. Why? Because you had transitioned and we're creating a new identity, which we're talking about today, okay? So you're going to be entering a new place to function in, and these are very real things that you're going to be dealing with. So the first thing I want to talk about is identifying an age of filters, right? When we look at the mirror today, the first thing I want to share with you is, as I mentioned, mirrors don't lie, right? It is what it is. You can't change it, and that's just the way it's going to be. The problem today, especially in this generation, is that there are the ability for you to have two different identities. And what I mean by that is that you have an online identity and you have a personal identity. And so what that has to do with is you feel tension around having to have what I would call an individual brand. So let's just step away for a second and talk about a brand. Some of you may be familiar with this. Some of you may have studied marketing, been a part of this. But one of the things that we talk about when we talk about a brand is we talk about perception. So probably most of you have lived long enough and walked the planet enough to know that perception is reality, right? It really doesn't matter a lot of times what is reality. It's what people see or perceive that is actually what they think is reality. Yesterday, I was going to FedEx, and while I was at FedEx, I was sitting there finishing a phone call. And while I was sitting there, a black, gorgeous, diamond, black, shiny, brand new Bentley pulled up in front of me. And I'm like, wow, this is an amazing car. I mean, I was like, whoa. I mean, amazing out. You know, this vehicle probably was $300,000. And I'm sitting there looking at it, and the back door opens, and you know how a Bentley opens, it's got the suicide door, right? So it opens up, and this lady climbs out of the car and walks across in front of my car and goes up and goes into Starbucks. And the car turns around and parks. So it was a driver. Somebody drove her there. So somebody obviously very wealthy, right, owned this car, and they had a driver. And the driver parked the car and was waiting for her to go get her coffee. Now, maybe she didn't want to make a big fuss in the Starbucks lot and people see the Bentley and be like, oh, who's this? And, you know, all of that, right? So she kind of pulled over here. She went over and got her coffee. But here's my point. The perception I have when I see that is this is somebody who's got amazing money, right? To have this kind of vehicle, to have a driver, right? How cool, right? Your own personal Uber everywhere you go, when you want, however you want to do it. But in reality, this might have been the housekeeper who was just coming to get a coffee for the person who really owns the car. You see, it's perception. And so perception isn't necessarily always reality. And so in the world we look at, when I talk about brand, I feel that what I see in Gen Z is that you feel the pressure to have a brand, to be perceived as this person, but then you're really this person. Let me take brand a little bit further, all right? Let's talk about marketing as a perception. When I say the word chicken, okay, the people who do sell food and people who sell clothing, right? Brand, they want brand recognition. When I say chicken, many of you are thinking Chick-fil-A. When I say chicken, some of you are thinking about Cane's, right? Why? Because these are top brands that you're familiar with in your generation that you love. It astounds me the number of people that go to Cane's. And what I continually hear about Cane's chicken is the sauce. I remember taking my son and his friends through the drive-thru one night to get Cane's late. They're all piled in the back. We go through the drive-thru to get chicken, and they roll down the back window, and they're telling the lady at the counter, hey, we need sauce. I'm trying to order food and drinks, and all they can do is scream out the back window, we need a lot of sauce. We need big sauce. So ultimately, the lady gives them like a quart cup of Cane's sauce, right? There's something about it. But here's my point. It's brand. You recognize when I say chicken, what is it that you think of? When I say Mexican, you think Chipotle. You think about Barrio, right? You think about these things based on the brand and the perception you have. Now, have any of you had a bad perception of one of these places? Have you ever went to Chick-fil-A and got a bad sandwich? Have you ever went to get Mexican and the food was horrible? It does happen, right? The commercials that we see on TV, when you see the ads that come up and the food is always like shiny. You can see the lights and the ketchup on the burger, right? And the cheese is melted just perfect and the bun is beautiful. Everything looks wonderful, right? And then when you go and get the cheeseburger, how come yours never looks that way, right? Sometimes perception is wrong. It isn't reality. So personally, we try to build a brand. And it's a problem because what you have is a split identity. You have a double identity, right? You have a brand that people see on Facebook and social and Instagram and all these things that you're running this brand. When they think of me, when they think of my name, this is who I want them to think about. But reality is on this side, this is who I really am. And there's a conflict there, right? There's a conflict. So typically Gen Z people, you have 3 different social media platforms you guys are typically on. And research says that 60% of your generation, so 6 out of 10 of you, feel more authentic when you're offline. You feel more yourself and who you really are when you're not engaging with social media. Okay? So let's talk about another aspect of identity. The second thing I want to help you to think about is how our past shapes us, right? So I don't care how old you are. You could be 30, you could be 50, you could be my age, right? Which we're not going to talk about. But whatever your age is, your past has an ability and a connection with a steering wheel still in your life. If there are things in your past that you had happen to you, good or bad, those things can still show up as a steering wheel in your life and turn your life in a different direction and rock your world and cause you problems and anxiety. And I think probably a lot of you, as I'm talking, are seeing things and remembering things and realizing that the past is what is making and forming me. Let me tell you a couple things about me from my past, right? From my childhood, my mom and dad were great people. Obviously, they were older. My dad was 55 when I was born. I continued the trend. I was 45 when my current son with my wife was born. So I think all the time, everything I'm dealing with a teenager, having a child at 45, my dad was dealing with at 10 years older than me. So right now, my dad, I won't tell you how old my dad would be because I'm not telling you, but he would be a lot older, okay? So they were good people. He had a good job. He worked at Rockwell. And he made good middle-class money, right? But they came from a humble beginning. And both my parents went through the Great Depression. And they learned how to like save stuff. And my mom, this is no joke. You guys this is gonna blow your mind. My mom used to rinse out saran wrap. Some of you on this podcast right now probably don't even know what saran wrap is. Okay. But, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but some of you be like, what are you talking about? Saran wrap. What does that mean? I don't know. Saran wrap is like plastic. You know, you pull it out on a little thing next to the aluminum foil and you rip it off and you put it over your dish and put it in the refrigerator. Okay. My mom used to rinse that stuff out and put it on the line and keep it and use it again. Is that nuts? But that's how frugal. So they weren't into brands is my point. And so as a little kid, you know, first thing for me, I'll tell you is about my clothes. I never had brand clothes. I never had a pair of Nikes. In fact, Nikes were just coming out when I was coming, up as a kid. But I never had name brand clothes. I used to wear these like double knit polyester pants to school, right? And this was before polyester was cool. This is before, you had joggers out of polyester and pants or shorts out of polyester and shirts that were awesome poly. This is way before. Polyester was not cool when I did this. And what was worse was polyester was not cool. I had polyester pants that had a little bell bottom on them that had checks all over them that were blue and green. Yeah, that's what I had. So needless to say, very major scar in my life with clothes. Why? Because people made fun of me. They always made fun of my clothes. And then, to top it off, the outfit. Here's the top of my outfit. Think about the pants. Now I got a polyester shirt that has big wheels that are like, I don't even know, they look like gears that are turning, and it's got blue and red and brown and orange on it. And a big collar that opens up like this, right? Yeah. And that's what I wore with these wonderful polyester checked pants. Okay, now you're going, dude, that's a bad fit. I know. That's why I'm telling you, the clothes, they made fun of me, right? And so as a result of that, it affected my life, right? They put me down. Now I'm over it, but my point is those kinds of things impact you, right? I was bullied. There were a group of guys in seventh grade who would meet me every morning on the way to school, and they would take my lunch money. No joke. They would take my lunch money, and I would go to school without money for lunch. And I don't even know how I ever got out of that mess. I really don't. I don't remember confronting my mom. I remember confronting them. That's a whole nother story. I'll tell you about that later, but it was a good gig. I went like completely Hulk on them and scared the crap out of them, and they never bugged me again. That's another story. I promise I'll tell you that. So I was bullied, okay? And then my dad died when I was 15. So just when I was like getting to a point where I think I told you last time I had the ADHD, NBC, CBS, HBO, well, you name it. I had it all. I was off the wall. They had me on Ritalin to calm me down. I was just action all the time. Well, just when I was starting to get good and get quiet and grow up a little bit, then my dad passed away. And so that rocked my world. It put me in a position where I had to, it was just me and mom, right? And I had to figure out, I felt like, gosh, I have to like survive. I don't have a dad. I got to be the guy, right? So all of these things, I tell you all that. So you get to know me a little bit, but outside of that, so that you will understand that life touches us and changes us. Those things have steered into my life over the years, okay? So what are some of the things that you think of that formed who you are? Just take a second and think about it. Like, what are some of the things that have really formed who you are? Have you been in a position where you've been put down and you don't believe in yourself? People have put you down, or check this out. How about that because of other people's stuff on Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and social media, you allow who they are to affect your self-esteem because you just can't seem to be like they are, right? You just can't seem to be like them. What about school? How has that affected you? Grades, people, the way they treat you, right? Have you had somebody betray you? Have you had a friend that you put complete confidence in and you trusted, and that person like blew you up completely in a relationship? That so jacks with you. That so messes with you because you're going to have a really, really, really difficult time trusting anybody again. Because when you trust somebody and they blow you up, it really, really hurts, right? Did you ever hear growing up, I love you? Was that something that was said in your family? Did you guys tell each other that? Did people affirm you? Did your family and your siblings, did you guys tell each other you love each other? Right? You might think, oh, come on, man. Some of you guys may be like, dude, seriously, we're going to talk about love. Yeah, no, you're human, right? We all need to be affirmed. So do you tell your parents? Do you tell your friends? Do you tell your siblings, hey, you know what, man, I love you. Not in a weird way. I love you as a friend. I care about you, right? What about divorces? What about abandonment? I would probably venture to say if I could like reach through the microphone out into social media and poll everybody listening, that probably 1 out of every 2 of you has been through a divorce in your family, that your parents have separated and you have been a part of that. Statistics would say probably 5 to 6 out of 10 of you listening, that would be the case, right? Very traumatic. Depending on how that went down, that steering wheel can take a lot of power into your life and steer everything about you. Can steer fear, can steer anxiety, can really jack up your future relationships, can really cause problems, right? What about addictions? Did you come up in a home? Are you still in a situation? Do you deal with this, right? Like just be real. Because why? Because we're looking at identity today and we're looking in the mirror. And the mirror doesn't lie. You can say one thing on social media, but your life is another thing in reality with identity, right? So what about addictions? Did you have people around you that dealt with addictions of all types? Do you deal with addictions, right? Those things can really affect our lives. What labels were you given as a kid that you're still trying to shake? Can you think back? Did you get a label, like, you the man or whatever, whatever the labels are that can be given to you in high school or when you were a little child, right? Growing up, maybe even into your adult life, right? There's something about you, somebody gives you labels. Those can be good or they can be bad, right? Based on your looks, based on your body, based on your grades, based on sports, okay? Understand when we talk about identity today, the second thing is that as you look in the mirror and you think about yourself, right, that these things affect our lives and they form who we are. Have you ever been around when they poured cement? Have you ever watched that happen? Have you ever, maybe some of you have worked in cement, right? You've been around and you've been tempted to take your finger or a stick and draw your initials in cement that was just poured when no one was looking, or put your handprint in it and, so no one knows that you put your handprint in the cement, right? Cement is able to be formed when it's fresh. But over time, and not a lot of time, that cement gets much harder and you are not going to be able to change what's happening in that substance. You can't put your fingerprint in it. You can't put your handprint in it anymore. And over time, understand that these things from our past form us and they can become very difficult and very hardened in our life. And we really have to focus to change it. So let me tell you about the third thing, right? I want to ask you if you live in crisis or calling. Do you live in a crisis or a calling? When we talk about identity and we talk about your life, right? Are you pursuing a calling in your life or is your life just a crisis, right? Are you in a spiral, a crisis and an identity spiral? And what I mean by that is an identity spiral looks like this, right? One day you wake up and you're thinking about this. And the next day you wake up and you're thinking about that. And the next day you think maybe something's going to happen today that will open a door in my life and give me direction, and it doesn't happen. And the next day you wake up and you think today something's going to show or happen in my life that will show me direction this way, and it doesn't happen, right? Let me just say this to you. If you're 20 years old, you have already lived about a quarter of your life. If you live to be 80 years old, you have lived a quarter of your life already at 20. You have lived 7,300 days so far if you're 20 years old, okay? You have lived 175,200 hours on planet Earth. Now you might go, whoa, that's a lot. Yeah, it is a lot. Doesn't it seem like it went pretty quick? You've already eaten up a quarter of your life if you're 20. And it only gets faster the older that you get. If you live to be 80 and you're currently 20, you have 21,900 days left. Whoa. You have 21,900 days left if you live to be 80. You have 526,600 hours left if you live to be 80. A little over 500,000 hours left. Now that probably stops and makes you look in the mirror, doesn't it? Probably makes you go, whoa. Hours click by, minutes click by, the days click by, right? And so when you live in this time, it goes fast. And the question is, are you living in crisis mode in your life, meaning that you're in a spiral where you're stressed one day you're anxious, one day you don't have direction. You just keep hoping that something will change, but you're not able to really get a direction and make decisions to move yourself in a direction that you need to, right? I want to remind you that you are here for a purpose. There is nobody that's walking planet Earth, breathing air, that was not put here and enabled to be here that doesn't have a purpose. You have a purpose. There is a reason that you're here. Ask yourself, what are 3 things that are really true about me? What are 3 things that are absolute truths about who you are? Just take a second and think about it. I can tell you there's 3 things about me that I can tell you are true. One is I do not like to waste time. I'm all about not wasting time. The second thing is I respect people and I expect them to respect me. If I'm going to give you respect, I expect respect back. Third thing about me is that I believe God's real, He's alive, and He's active in my life personally, right? Those are 3 things about me that are very real. What are you passionate about? Do you know what you're passionate about? And I'm not talking about relationships here, right? Okay, you can go off the rail on that one. Okay, that's not the direction I'm going on this. What are you passionate about? What is it that when you feel comfortable doing? What is it that when you think about it, you get excited inside? There's something inside that jumps when you think about it, right? You kind of feel like this is who I am. This is, kind of like what I was made to do. What excites you when you talk about it, right? Those are things that are very, very important for you to look at. So realize that there is a difference between a calling and living in crisis. I think all of us would probably want to be in a calling, right? All of us would love to know how we fit like a puzzle piece into a place in life that is perfectly comfortable for who we are, what we were created to be, what we were created to do. I think all of us would say it's really what we would like, right? Question is, how do we bridge? How do we get over there, right? How do we get to a point where we understand that? So the fourth thing that I want to share with you as we kind of wind down today is that we need to look at how I can become and build who I am meant to be. Who is my identity and what is my identity and who am I meant to be, right? Here's a quote for you. You need to embrace change because identity is a journey, not a fixed destination, right? It's not a place I'm going to go from here and be that. It is a journey that continually happens in your life. And in order to do this, you have to separate the role in life from an identity in life, right? So let's talk about that as we talk about this last point. A role is what you do. That's what a role is. An identity is who you are. And many times these things get confused, right? Especially in your generation, it can become very confusing that you think that this is who I am, but really this is your role, or you think this is what I do, but it's really more of an identity, right? So you have to be able to look at those things. Your roles in life will change a lot. Okay. I can tell you for me, my roles in life have significantly changed. I mean, I worked in a factory. I cut trees in the summertime with a big chainsaw when it was 90 degrees. We cut trees down, we chop them up, we put them in a wood chipper and blow them out, make them into mulch, right? I did that for a while. I worked with rough lumber. I did all kinds of different things. I worked in business. I worked in sales. I started a tech company. I worked in different markets, manufacturing, insurance, healthcare, banking, right? I've been in ministry, working with families and with people about their lives. I've been an entrepreneur. All of this stuff evolves, and I've had all of these roles, but that's not my identity, right? Let me give you some examples real quick of identity. These are some identity words. See if you can associate with some of these, all right? I'm curious. I'm empathetic, right? And empathetic, just so you know, this is a big one that's missing today in the culture we live in your generation, right? Empathy means, hey, I'm going to think about the other person and I'm going to try and understand what they're going through and try and associate and adjust my behavior and my attitude appropriately, right? We don't have a lot of empathy for people today. Somebody's sick or somebody's family member died or somebody lost something or, we'll go tell people about it. But do we really try and understand what it would be like if we felt that and we had to deal with it, right? That's a big one, empathy, all right? creative, loyal, free-spirited, dreamer, honest, introvert, extrovert. Are you a person who like hides in the corner at a party and doesn't want to talk to anybody and can't get words out? Or are you the extrovert who's in the middle of the floor and you're the life of the party, right? Adventurous, seeker, protector, kind, anxious, optimist, survivor, and a visionary. Those are examples of identity, okay? Here's some examples of roles, okay? Here's some examples of roles. Student, parent, daughter, son, teacher, manager, artist, friend, employee, leader, athlete, volunteer, sibling, breadwinner, caregiver, influencer, spouse, partner, okay? Now, I tell you all those because here's the formula. What you really need to know and take note of this is how do I know the difference between whether it's a role or identity in my own personal life? And here's how, okay? Here's the question you're going to ask yourself. Would I still be this if everything was stripped away and I had no job and I had no obligations? Okay? So would I still be this thing, this word, if everything was stripped away and I had no job and no obligations? If the answer is yes, that's your identity. If the answer is no, that's a role. That's a very easy formula for you to use to figure out your identity versus a role, okay? I would urge you, based on the discussion we've had today about looking in the mirror and understanding yourself, to really think about taking your core values and thinking about who you are, basically identity, right? Your core values, and add daily habits that may be a little bit different. And eventually that's going to equal an emerging identity. What that means is you're going to see change, but none of that is going to happen unless you decide to do something. You cannot expect that every day somebody's going to come and rock your world and open some magic door for you, right? So today we talked about how we've looked in the mirror. The mirrors don't lie. Hopefully you've been able to see a little bit more about your identity and who you are as a person versus who you are in a role doing something, right? And how our past shapes us. We've also talked about chasing a brand, right? Are you in a brand situation where you're worried about perception versus the reality of who you are? We've talked about, are you in a crisis or are you in a calling? Do you realize and understand that there really is a purpose? And once you begin to find a way to get into understanding where that piece of your life fits into the puzzle, that's where real happiness is going to come to for you. And you're not going to wake up dreading every day. You're going to wake up being excited about your day. Now realize that there are two different sides to us, right? There's a physical side and there's a spiritual side. If you only focus on what you literally see in a mirror, and you only focus on what you can touch and feel and what your body looks like and what you're putting on your body and what your hair is and all the things about you, and you leave the spiritual side alone, then you're going to have a problem. You're always going to be in conflict because you cannot do that. You're a created being, and all of us have the physical and the spiritual side. We tend to neglect the spiritual side of who we are, right? And what we get by doing that is a lot of anxiety and a lot of frustration and a lot of wondering and spinning and really not understanding, where we need to go. So you have to decide on purpose to take action and to do something different, right? Like the longer that you decide to do something new, and you do that new thing in your life multiple times. I think they say that if you do something 21 times in a row, that it becomes a new habit, if I'm not mistaken. The longer that you do that new thing, it becomes your new thing, right? The old thing changes. It's like I was telling my son the other day, it's like building a new road, right? You're going to forge a new road. You're going to go, rip it up and tear it up, and we're going to lay the foundation, and then ultimately we're going to put the pavement down, and this is now the new way over here to get to wherever you want to go, and the old way is closed. We don't go that way anymore. Well, that's the way our brains work, right? Now, I'm going to tell you, I'm not a psychologist, right? I've talked to a lot of them, but what I can tell you is our brains are all the same. We're human, right? Some are bigger, some are smaller, right? Some run faster, some don't. But the point is, we build new pathways so when you start a new habit, the more that you do it, it becomes your new norm, and it will change the way that you see things and do things in your life. I want to ask you to consider a question today. I want to ask you, when you think about your purpose, your abilities, what are the things that you feel that about you that's unique, that you think you could use to make a difference, right? That's unique about you. Remember last time I talked with you about the fact that we're all different, because all you got to do is put your hands up and look at your fingerprints, right? Nobody has your fingerprints. You are unique. So what about you is special? What do you have to offer? What's your passion, right? Where do you find yourself on this identity question that we've been talking about? And I'd like to ask you to consider something, since a lot of people completely neglect the spiritual side. We spend a ton of time on the physical. We spend a lot of time getting confused by being the brand, carrying the brand, and being perception on the outside. I'm going to ask you to consider something. Would you consider the fact that you might just have a wrong understanding of some spiritual things, that actually God might not be who you think he is? That you might actually have a wrong idea about him? Would you consider the fact that if you haven't really tried to know him and really taken the steps to know him, would you consider the fact that it's really not a fair shake, right? And I would urge you to consider that and think about it, because that will address the spiritual side of who you are, which will complete as you're trying to impact your identity and become who you feel that you really are. I'll point you to, I wrote a book called Finding the Answer. It's up on Amazon. I think we can probably put a link right in here so that you can click on it and get right to Amazon if you want to get the book. I think the paperback's like $9.99. But the book is written specifically, it's 30 minutes long for you to read, and it deals with these things that will present some things to you that you may not have really thought about, and you might want to consider getting it. I'd like to thank you for taking the minute today to come into the podcast. And I want to tell you that we're going to be talking about relevant stuff. We're going to be talking about money. We're going to be talking about credit. We're going to be talking about friendships and all kinds of different things that you guys are dealing with. And the goal is, again, to give you something you leave here thinking about for a while. And I hope today that we've really, really been able to do that. And I want to tell you today as we leave that you're unique. Remember, there's only one you. So until next time, please do something. We'll see you soon.